This is horse armour. It's quite pleasant to look at if you enjoy shiny things, but it's what it represents that is much more tarnished, and it's a topic that's somewhat like beating a dead horse at this point. Those of you who remember the before times will recall that most games didn't get DLC, which stands for downloadable content. This was largely because of the bandwidth constraints of the dial-up modem. The best you could hope for would be the odd developer patch or some community modifications and additional maps if the game in question was really popular. When major alterations or wholesale changes were made to a game, they came in the form of an expansion pack. Generally speaking, those would only appear for games that were financially successful, and more often than not they offered quality extensions of the original ideas from either the same group of developers or new and upcoming development studios that worked within the genre, and clearly worshipped the game they were expanding upon. These days, bandwidth is plentiful, and most games are a service that you either subscribe to or lease a license in order to play. This brave new world allows companies to patch games much easier, often greatly benefiting titles that needed a bit of a polish after they had initially come out, or offering new technological features and enhancements that weren't around when the game first appeared. This is great stuff, and you can scroll through patch notes of most of these updates and see all the things they've fixed or improved upon. The problem with this is that design of games is an art form in and of itself, and all great artists reach a point where they have to stop altering their work and present it for public consumption. The desire to keep changing and tweaking things is one that every creator has come across, and it's very difficult to just let something go when you feel like you could have improved upon it further. Just ask George Lucas. Providing creators with a platform where they can constantly alter their work also means that eventually some will take it too far, and the changes will no longer be beneficial. For some titles, it will be a business decision, such as unifying their games under one launcher, so that the player has to click 2 buttons instead of 1 in order to play the game, but while doing so they may spot another title that they want to buy. Hooray for advertising! For others, it'll be a licensing issue where a certain piece of music vanishes because they'd get sued for keeping it past the expiration of said license, and they don't want to renew it because money. The most high-profile case of this are the radio stations from the Grand Theft Auto games, which are a digital shadow of what they once were upon release. What this has also allowed is for fans of the game to officially take over the maintenance of the title in question, either through joining the company in charge of that 20 or 30 years after the game's release, or straight up being given the right to do so. This is good for legacy updates and quashing of old bugs, as the people in question are usually very familiar with the game. Take friend of the channel Jason Millward as an example. While helping develop the unofficial TIE Fighter Total Conversion, he made the decision to remove some outstanding bugs in several of the maps that the developers hadn't noticed. This kind of detailed improvement decades after release is to be applauded. The problem is when these fans of games decide to alter things to their liking rather than for the greater good, with balance changes that favour those who have invested hundreds of hours. It caters to a niche group and diverges too greatly from the original vision of the title, making it less approachable to curious gamers despite any technological enhancements it may bring. The biggest issue is the lack of object permanence in a digital world. A great example of this is Loom. Do you want to play the EGA version of Loom? It sacrifices the voice acting but has a better soundtrack and more dialogue, improving the story exposition. It's also how Lucasfilm Games originally released Loom, with the CD version for DOS coming out later in 1992. Thanks to the licensing issues I talked about earlier, the CD version couldn't be purchased for years. Then 2009 rolled in and that version of Loom was released on Steam. Great! Except it was just that version. The floppy became largely unavailable, and players weren't given the choice on Steam to pick between versions. Over a decade later and they're still stuck with the PC CD-ROM version, which the creator Brian Moriarty states isn't even the best VGA version of the game. So many players that remember Loom from their early 90s gaming days will have bought and played this version and frowned at their screens. Wait, wasn't there meant to be music here? Did I dream that? Then they'll go back and look it up on YouTube and discover that yes, they've been sold a turkey. Modern games suffer from this problem too. You used to be able to tell Steam not to update the game to the newer version. That's gone. So if a developer decides to push an update that makes things worse or even breaks the game, you have no say in the matter because it's a digital license and it's not sitting on your shelf. They can do what they please and you'll just have to put up with it. Or sail the high seas. So how does this all relate to DLC, Lonnie? I'm coming to that, fear not. But first, early access titles are a thing now and many companies use that program effectively, with a larger pool of what are essentially alpha and beta testers giving them money under the unspoken agreement that the game will improve with their input. The problem with unspoken agreements is that they're not legally binding. So a developer can jump ship whenever they please and tell these fine folk, haha, got your money. The vetting process that games went through has been irrevocably broken. You had the demo of a game to play, then you had extensive reviews from trusted sources that didn't serve as glorified hype men. And then you had your group of friends who weren't internet personalities with an agenda or promotion schedule. If a game passed muster with all three of these, usually it'd be pretty good. Sure, there was always shovelware clogging up the shelves, but with fantastic games coming out every month of the year for over a decade, that didn't matter so much. Now games are in a constant state of critical flux. Are the reviews talking about a previous version? Did the title get review bombed? Has a patch fixed all the issues people have griped about? Did the DLC editions make the game better or worse? Are the people reviewing the title trustworthy or speaking in good faith? Who can tell? The worst offenders in this category are those frequently referred to as base games. These provide a basic experience within vanilla, and then use that as a vehicle to upsell you on DLC. Upselling in the gaming industry is a sales strategy, where the definitive experience in a game is just one DLC around the corner, where an artificial problem is made by the developer, and then they release a DLC to fix it. You know, the sort of thing that used to be patched in for free, and people give them more money either because they expect quality or they're completionists. And so it keeps happening. Back in the day, the naysayers such as myself warned people that this was a slippery slope. Lonnie, that's a fallacy, was the response. If you're that bothered by it, just wait until the Ultimate Super Mega Edition is released. Go and ask fans of the original Planetary Annihilation how that's going. Or maybe people who bought Sins of a Solar Empire on GOG. We've reached the point where even the Ultimate Edition isn't quite the complete version in many cases. And some games just never get one, instead churning out DLC after DLC. And for some people who only play one game, that's fine. Take the train enthusiasts with more disposable income than your average Fortune 500 company. They'll happily spend 300 quid or more on additional train sets and models and be perfectly happy. Just look at The Sims for an even better and more widespread example. There are plenty of casual gamers who play it almost exclusively. It's like its own little gaming ecosystem that people occasionally throw money at for a new feature. Horse Armor. It was largely cosmetic, it didn't change the game, but it ushered in a world where gaming could be sold piecemeal, one microtransaction after the next. And rather than creating new content for a complete game, developers sliced up the product that they had and sold it bit by bit on a schedule, complete with an aggressive marketing scheme, letting you know that further amazing experiences awaited you if you just opened your wallet that little bit wider. Many games benefited from this extended lifespan, and some of them kept improving and became modern-day classics. And there's always going to be that desire to return to something familiar but slightly different, than attempt to play something completely new each time. But by giving into this feeling and allowing developers to rest on their laurels, you're killing other games before they're even made. Why bother making something new after all when you can get just as much money for half the effort and augment your already released title with some further DLC? I would love to have lived in a world where Daggerfall had got quest packs and even more patches and the like, but if you told me the sacrifice was Morrowind never existing, nah. The overall cost of this attitude and its exploitation has been devastating to the industry. Now we're in a horrifying world of mobile-centric games, and the ones that aren't are loot box skinners or have advertisement menus, unskippable logos, pre-game launchers, card gambling elements, or have become unmoddable garden-walled money suckers that cater to the people with an eroded impulse control and access to money. The base level modern game features elements that gamers 20 years prior would have looked at with bafflement. But over the ensuing years, they've instead been conditioned into acceptance of this modernity. And that's why so many of us only partake in a few of these titles, if any, choosing instead to return to the games of yesteryear. Because despite the inherent advantages that this digital landscape provides, it was only ever going to turn into a dystopian wasteland of greed and exploitation. And if you enjoyed me randomly rambling about gaming, feel free to look at this playlist of my scripted videos, or just visit the channel in general. I've got a lot of stuff on there from yesteryear that you might enjoy. Until next time.